This is not my film crew, in case you're wondering.
Would that be posted on the school website?
Yes, this will be posted on the school website. Come on in. Okay, so we're going to start.
Yes, I'd like to introduce Sean Grover, for those who don't know him, which is most of us. He's a very effervescent speaker and a great topic tonight.
Well, welcome. Thank you for coming. You're the hardcore parents, right? You're here. Joanne, what was tonight? You picked something, right?
Yes, developing healthy habits.
Developing healthy habits in teenagers. So what we're going to do, I'm going to talk for a few minutes up front. Just going to cover the basics of adolescence, and there's an article around here about the 5 things every teenager needs. If you can cover these 5 things with your teenager, you're in really good shape. So the first thing is tension outlets. You know what that is? All right, tension outlets come in all sorts of forms. Mostly at this age, you need physical outlets. A lot. They need to discharge tension physically. You have creative outlets, all kinds of outlets, but physical is king. So a lot of kids will come to my office and I'll know within 30 seconds who is doing absolutely nothing physically. This is their physical. This is physical. That's their workout, right? So the tension outlets, there's lots of studies on this, that it reduces anxiety and depression by 70%. Did you see an eyebrow went over there? 70%, for adults too. So a lot of people walking around on antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications. If they were to do a cardio 3 times a week for 30 minutes, that would cut their anxiety almost in half or more. So that works with your kids. Go ahead.
Just anxiety or anxiety and depression?
Anxiety and depression. Anything about tension outlets?
If we chase them around the house for 30 minutes, is that the same?
That does not count. That's very creative, but that does not count. Questions about tension outlets?
Specifically, what kind of cardio are you talking about?
Well, what kind of cardio? I prefer violent cardio at this age, which is boxing, fencing, sports-oriented. The boy that I saw here a few years ago came in my office, and I saw him for therapy, and he just sat like this, you know, with fists. And I said to his mother, I said, I want you to take him down to Mendez Gym on 26th Street and sign him up for boxing. She said after the 1 lesson, he came home, said, I'm starving, ate dinner, and went to bed. There was no computer. There was no trying to pry the phone out of his hands. And he wasn't in therapy a long time. He was about 3 months or less even. So those cardio, you can't underestimate that. And you see kids who don't have tension outlets, look at their fingers. Look at their hair. Look at their skin. They're trying, their body is trying to release the tension. So this will do it, you know, this will do it. But the cardio is the simplest and most effective way. There's a lot of parents come to my office and say like, well, I say, well, what are they doing physically? Well, they don't want to do anything. I'm like, well, what do you mean? No, they don't want to do no. The kid's making the parenting decisions at that point. I don't want to do that, I don't want to do that. Job as a parent is to make unpopular decisions. If your child at some point hates you or is mad at you, you're on the right track, okay? A lot of parents are afraid of losing love or something terrible is going to happen if the child, at this age it's all about separation. And what starts separation? The first time your child does this, the separation process has begun. So it's usually a no. Tension outlets, any other questions about that? So did I answer your question? Any kind of sports-oriented, soccer is great. Anything they offer at the school, basketball, something that's going to get them really going and kind of exhaust them. Their sleep will improve. A lot good will come out of it. Go ahead.
So if they're not interested in any sort of, you know, you sit there and you give them, do you want to do this? Do you want to? And it's no.
Right.
Now, how do you get them to
Right.
actually find
Say yes.
an outlet?
If you have no leverage with your kid at this age, you're heading for real trouble in high school. They can pick 1 of 3. Which one's it going to be? This, or this? I don't want any of them. Not a choice. You can pick. Want me to pick it? I'm picking ballet. The answer at this age is always no. Isn't it usually no? It's no, right? No. So.
But I think what she said, that there has to be a buy-in, is a pretty important key, because they can say no even if you sign them up for ballet.
That's right. Well, it depends on the nature of your kid, right? If you have an oppositional kid, you know, coming in hard is a disaster, because oppositional kids want to defeat you, and they will defeat you. They will use themselves to blackmail you. They will harm themselves to undo any kind of leverage you have. So it depends on the child. Some kids you can wheel and deal. You know, kids have been in therapy. I can't tell how many kids have been in therapy with me because they got a cell phone. Or they got unlimited texting if they went into therapy. And then within a few sessions, you know, of course, then I can't get rid of them. And we've forgotten even why they came. So that was just the leverage to get them through the door. A lot of kids are dragged to sports activities. One kid over at Clinton was dragged to track, crying. And when he got there, he came in second and he couldn't wait to come back. You know, so if you went with the no, you're going to deny your kids a lot of opportunities.
It sounds like it's a kind of a universal theme here in terms of how do you make kids do things they don't want to do.
That's right.
And when do you negotiate? What is the difference between a bribe and an incentive? Right. You know, punish carrot versus stick.
Gosh, I've seen parents pay for grades, like outrageous things. But you have to be very careful because you are modeling for your child, you know, sort of a culture of the way the world works. So if you work with bribes or threats or this, you're going to get that from your kid right back. You know, if you're coming from that space. Getting them to do what they don't want to do, you've kind of always been doing that, right? But now it's getting harder? It's getting harder. If you're having difficulty in this area, it's more representative of you and your history than your child in front of you. Does that make sense? Okay. A lot of parents who are strict parents, like really crazy strict parents, made a promise in their youth they would never be that way. So those parents tend to be overly permissive. They don't set limits and boundaries. There's routines. Everything's very loose. And then around this age, it starts to backfire big time. How did it work when you were a kid?
My parents were very loose.
Was that effective with you?
It was fine with me.
But not with your kids?
No, I'm the opposite, like you said. I'm too tight.
So generally, when parents get in a hole with this stuff, you know, like a pattern is set in, and it just seems like this is now the culture of the family. First of all, kids are always going to seize power whenever possible. They can smell when you're wavering. And they know better than anyone where to push, what button to push in you. And they get you to say things and do things unimaginable, you know, because what happens when you spend a lot of times with children, there's a regression. You begin to respond like they get mad and you're like, oh yeah? And suddenly there's you lose your footing. And I've sat in plenty of parenting sessions and thought, who's the parent here? You know, the way they were arguing and bickering and everything like that. When you get into that situation, we had to have a cultural shift around this age in the family. The parenting that worked in elementary school, not only is it not going to work in middle school, but it's going to start to backfire. Because a lot of parenting is built on control in elementary school. And at this point, they don't want to be controlled. So when I get in a bind with parents and we meet with families, usually parents will, I coach them to say something like this. You know, I've made a lot of mistakes. I'm realizing I'm treating you like a little kid. And you're not a little kid anymore. Look at you, you're big and you're going to be off soon. So I don't want to, there's a few things I don't want to do anymore. I'm not going to do this, this, and this. And this is what I need you to do. The minute you tell a kid that they're more mature and they're going to get more freedom, and they're going to have more responsibility, you'll be shocked how they rise to the occasion. That is very attractive to a young person. You know, I've had a lot of people come in where there's lists on the refrigerator and stars and all that stuff, and within a few months we throw it all away because the trust has been reestablished. We don't want to police their kids at this point, be the parole officer for our children, stuff like that. So really, if you're in that bind, we have to sort of step back and look at the whole family. Because if we just focus on one kid, you know, then it's not really fair. And any kid who comes to therapy with me in a real depression, I'll whisper to them, you know, this isn't about you, it's about your whole family. Oh, I knew it! Oh my God, you're the only person who knew that. You know, so they don't want to be singled out. And the way I'm talking now to you is the worst way to talk to your kids. Sitting like this, talking, look at each other. the worst. Feelings, right? Forget feelings until they're married and have 2 kids. If you try to talk on a feeling level with a adolescent or a preteen at this age, you're going to get frustration, anger. They're going to strike out at you because you're pressuring to do something they don't do very well. And I've seen parents really go for the jugular. How do you feel about that? What does that make you? And the kids get. Do you ever notice how angry your kids get when you become their therapist? You know. So if you're going to talk with kids, the best way to talk is when you're doing something else. When you're engaged in an activity. When you're eating. When you're in a car. When you're biking. When you can bring up almost anything under those conditions. But they're not trapped. It's not a hostage situation. And a lot of kids will tell you when they're, oh, and don't go together. If you want to have a serious talk with your kid, decide who's the person to do it. The minute there's 2 against 1, they're ready for war. And kids say that. They gang up on me. And the minute the mom loses steam, like she starts to stumble, dad jumps in, and they're tag teaming. So 1-on-1 is much, much better. Much better.
Yes?
I'm in a situation where my son's at the age where he's extremely competitive with me. He's got to win, and even when we're playing a simple game of Monopoly, when he doesn't win, he breaks down. And we're under 2 philosophies. One philosophy is he's got to learn to get better to win. My wife's philosophy is I need to let him win more often to make him feel like he's accomplishing. I don't know which way to go.
Do you help them to win sometimes?
I don't.
Good.
Not good.
Tough love. It would be very interesting if you stopped the game and said, there's 3 moves I'm thinking you got to choose between. If he felt like you were on his side, like you switched to his team for a little while, he wouldn't feel so defensive, and he wouldn't feel defeated. He'd feel like you were coaching him through a difficult situation. But with fathers and sons, there's a natural competition that comes up. Anytime you hit the pause button when you're a kid, like a reflective pause, like in the middle of something, you just hit it. All right, wait a minute, let's just think about all our options here. You're helping them to develop a stronger sense of self. You know, so if in the heat of the moment, rather than, you want to do this preemptively. You don't want to wait until he has a full-blown meltdown, because then he's not listening, his feelings are hurt, he's just fleeing to his room. But if you can share with them in that moment your process, well, this is what I'm thinking. And if you really want to rock your kid's world, you share your insecurities. You model for them how you get their advice on something. Well, all right. So everyone's worried about what? Drugs and sexual behavior and all that stuff. And if you come to your kid with that, what are you going to get? Generally, when you do the talk, there's only one person talking. And the other person is squirming and saying, I know all this. Oh, my God. Yeah, please. So I had a father who was very worried about his daughter. And he was coming at her, with these, you better not, and this, that. And kids are great. The minute you come down on them, they're going to find a way around you. They're going to go underground. They're going to agree with you just to get you to stop talking. They're going to say what you want to hear. So what I really advise, if I'm doing a presentation, if you were all teenagers, right? You're all teenagers, and I'm here to talk about adolescent development. If I were to say, how do you guys feel about being teenagers? What's going on in your lives? What are you worried about? What frightens you? What are you scared about socially? What's going to happen? Dead silence. That's called an ego-oriented question or a self-oriented question. Disaster. Absolute disaster, because this is a time of, the main task is identity formation, right? So they don't have a strong sense of identity. So when you start putting them on the spot in that way, they fall apart. And they get angry at you, and then they storm off, and you don't know, well, what did I do? So if I were running that same workshop with teenagers, I would go up to the board, and I would draw a stick figure. And I say, this is Derek. It's his first day in middle school. What do you think he's going through? All the hands go up. They can talk about it. You know, it's not about them. You learn from their projections and about them. In terms of that kind of talk, recently a mother said, she read an article in the paper and she said, you know, I heard that this particular school I won't mention has a lot of drugs and stuff going on in it. And is that true? And the daughter says, let me explain this to you, Ma. And goes on to tell her everything about what she's struggling with and everything. So you have to be more creative. In elementary school, you may go right to them with a question and you may get an answer or not. At this age, you have to be much more creative. Does that make sense? The next thing is esteem building activities. Your child should have 3 to 5 sources for self-esteem. 3 to 5. A lot of kids, if I'm seeing kids from Stuyvesant or certain schools, all they have is one source of self. What is it? Academics, right? Or when I saw kids from the American Ballet Theater, they had one source. And when they got injured, they all became suicidal. They had nothing else. So your kid has to have 3 to 5. That means it looks something like this. They're proud of their academics. They're in a club. They play an instrument. They have talents that they, I feel like I'm describing your kids, Yuko, by the way. They have talents, musical talents or creative talents. They have 5 or 6 sources. So if anything goes bad or is wobbly, they have a lot of buffers in between. You know, a lot of kids with learning disabilities have this phenomenal ability to compensate. You know, they got amazing people skills, or they can really present themselves in a certain way, or they're amazing at sports. You would never even know that they can be reading on a 4th grade level, which has happened. I've found kids like that who were in 10th grade. Had no clue because they compensated. So those sources of self-esteem are really important. You really want to dig up a lot. You know, a lot of parents will come in. There was a girl from this school a few years ago who, you know, it was all about clamping down. We're clamping down. We're going to clamp down now. And this was like war. But she started a hip hop class, and then she joined the trapeze school. You know that place? Yes. And then she became a CIT, a counselor in training at one of the Y or youth. Everything changed. The friends she hung out with, what she did in her spare time. So rather than trying to rip from their hands these things, you have to supply richer experiences. That is going to be much more effective. You know, they say if you can take a bottle away from a baby, if you have a teddy bear, then they just drop the bottle. But if you're trying to grab that bottle and you're not offering anything else, it's going to be war. So that's self-esteem. Yes?
Video games, does being good at a game count as one of these 3 or 5 self-esteem?
Minecraft?
Yeah. Well, video games are really tricky. Some kids, if you were to look online, do a search under like addiction, and merge that with video games, you will find your kid meets the criteria. And they may even want to stop but can't. They know it's not good for them, but they still want to do it, you know. So video games, if you have a certain kind of kids, I always recommend limiting it. If some parents have, it depends on your family, no video games during the week, 2 hours on the weekend. Or some parents have unlimited video games, but their kids are like straight A's and they have all these sources for self-esteem. So video games is just part of many things they do. But if your kid's just about video games, and we don't have tension outlets and we don't have other sources of self-esteem, even then if you're going to be in big trouble. You're going to be so if your kid has all these things, if you have a mix, it's much healthier, much healthier. And kids want to be stopped when they get that crazy look in their eye, and they'll hate you for it at the moment, but you'll see their anxiety goes down. You know, structure soothes anxiety. So when a kid has structure, even though they rebel against it, their anxiety tends to be much lower. You take that kid and remove the structure, and they feel great, but within a day or two, you'll notice they're doing terribly. Their mood is deteriorated. They're not getting things done on time. They don't have the internal structures. You know, it's very hard for them to be with their own thoughts because they're not all that good sometimes. And so they need to, so they will distract themselves until they're at the point of passing out to avoid that kind of self-reflection. you know. So whenever sleep issues, I would really address that. First, I'd want to look at what they're doing physically. You know, are they active enough? And a lot of kids with very disturbing tension outlets in terms of cutting and drug use and stuff like that, even those start to fade away when you've introduced. I've seen kids. I had a kid who was a drug dealer at Brooklyn Tech, became a tap dancer in one summer and dropped everything because he went into a program and he was really good. Structure, limits, and boundaries. Pretty simple stuff. Structure is daily routines, things you do consistently. That's very soothing, kids, even though they'll sort of hate you for it at times, but they know that we get up this time, we eat at this time, this is what our family does. That's very comforting to them. Boundaries. Boundaries really have to do with the space between people, right? So setting boundaries with people in terms of like physical boundaries. I can always see kids come with families with poor boundaries and they join one of my groups. They're like, hey, can I have those chips? You know, and they do these like socially disastrous things. So really teaching your kid about that kind of space. Limits. Okay, limits. Limits are great at this age. Limits are curfews, what do they call when they give you money? Allowance, anything like that. At this point, here it comes. You ready? I haven't said this to anyone yet. Your kid should never get money for nothing. Should never get money for nothing. Okay? Huh? If you want to do chores, if you want to do this, but I've seen lots of kids, you really can feed a delinquent attitude when they start blackmailing you for more money or just like that. So at this age, you start to transition. Really? Who gets money for nothing anyway, by the way? Anyone here get money for nothing? I'll change careers right now. No? So that's really something you want to start addressing around this time. And kids are really, you know, when a kid makes money, I have interns, right? I have teen interns that work with me. And if they're in high school, they work with the middle schoolers. I pay them $15 or $20 a session. Oh my God, they're like the president of GM when they get paid, you know. And you know, I gave a kid, let's see, your parents will give you $50 a week, or you can make $30 a week working at this smoothie shop in the East Village. Smoothie shop. You know, they want that independence. Your kid, you know, this is a dynamic we're in right now. They're dependent on you. They resent being dependent on you. They're dependent on you. They resent being dependent on you. You know, so anytime like a parent that's too giving or too nurturing or too generous, too like that, something starts to happen. The kid starts to get almost abusive towards them. Like, why is that? I'm being so nice. What's happening is you're feeding the dependency, and they unconsciously do not like that. They don't like that. So then they have to start to like push back. They will prompt a fight in order to feel autonomous. Does that make sense? Usually you're here in middle school. This is a perfect time to restructure. It's ideal. Kids come into my office at 17, 18. Oh my God, I have so much work to do. And the failure to launch kids are huge. That's what some of my largest populations are, the college kids who came home. You know, the parents provided this scaffold that held them together through middle school and high school, and they were so proud that they graduated. The parents should have their name on the diploma with them. Mm-hmm. But what happens? Those kids go off to college. They don't have the internal controls. It wasn't really fostered. So the B that your kid struggles to get is much more valuable than the A you micromanaged him through. And he won't really benefit. He won't really get the same esteem boost because he knows you really did most of the work for him. There's a great book called Yes, Your Teenager is Crazy. And it tells you what's going on in their brain and why, you know, a lot of questions that are put to them they cannot answer. But that's a wonderful book if you want to look through the lens of a teenager. So,
Just a question on the abuse. How much abuse do you take from them? They're pushing
Zero.
it away. But
Zero.
So they're talking, basically I just don't respond. I mean, so I'm not really accepting it because they're not getting a reaction from me.
Right.
Okay. But as my husband puts it, why are you letting her talk to you that way?
Right.
But
Right.
what I tell them is a conversation is between two people. If I'm not listening, I'm not talking. So I actually, that's how I cope.
Right.
But is he right or am I right?
No abuse is acceptable. It's not acceptable. However, if you lean towards a sort of dictatorial parenting, you're about to get a huge payback around this time. So this time you really want a middle way. I can't tell right now, based on what you're telling me, if that's a problem, but it's totally okay. Kids will tell me in my groups, and I run a lot of groups, that's the #1 recommendation for teenagers. But therapists, I'll tell you now, therapists hate teenagers. They mess up your office, they smell, so you don't find a lot of teenage groups. But kids will tell me in the groups, they confess all the time, it's always amazing to me, they would rather be beaten than have their parent be quiet or withdraw from them. They would rather, and they will come at and try to cause fights. What happens when you withdraw from your child? First of all, you're using the leverage of your relationship. You're training them. You can't abuse someone and just expect there's no, that person just always going to love you and give you what you want. It's not realistic, right? So a lot of families will come in, and a family I worked in Jersey where there were a lot of yelling and stuff like that, and I said, Howard, you no longer yell. That's it. No more yelling. You either leave the room or you say something like, I don't want to continue this conversation. And what happened was, here was a kid who was dragged to therapy. Howard stopped yelling. And you know what she said? What did you do to my father? She was like furious. And then she started coming at him, and he was like, I'm so hurt by your behavior. I don't want to talk about it anymore. You know what she did? She demanded a family meeting in the office. So suddenly, and what did Howard say when he came into the meeting? He said, I like this. This is much better. So a lot of times that yelling and all that stuff, it really takes, so you're on the right track.
So we're both right pretty much.
You're both right. You need both. You can't teach your child anything that you don't model. You can't teach them anything that you don't model. That's like a big mistake a lot of parents. So forget about lectures, forget about this. I can't tell you. Do you guys like gossip? Oh, I have some really good gossip. The things I see in my office is so astonishing to me, and I wonder what the parents were thinking when they sent their kids to therapy. Last year, a kid was grounded. For what? Stealing his mother's weed. I'm serious. Or another kid who had a drug problem, I said to his father, I was trying to figure out, and as a therapist, you feel like, what's going on here? Like nothing's working, And you look at, and I said to the father, how do you unwind after like a really tough day? He said, I usually have 1 or 2 bottles of wine. So he's bringing his child because he's worried about substance abuse or things like that. And this is what's being modeled in the home. What am I going to do with that? So it's very tricky. Whatever you expect from your child, you got to be willing to go. And with your kids, we'd really want to crawl inside that moment. We want to hit the pause button and say, what's really going on in this dynamic? And if your kid, look, you can do it now. Tell you now, this is one of the few times you can use guilt, because kids don't have a conscience at this age. They do horrible things because they don't have enough. A lot of children just don't have enough of that. So if you're upset, if you're hurt, and you let it be known, and you do withdraw, and you don't have the fight. If you have a fight, then the kid just blames you, right? You're the object. You caused all the problems. But when you stop the fight, the kid has to sit with their own thoughts. And they don't like what they're feeling. And often parents will say an hour later, they'll come and apologize, when they never apologized in their life, because they can't stand the feelings they're left with when you don't engage them. If you fight with them, they're going to win.
Going back to this notion of how much you help your kids or don't help your kids, it would be great if my child, my son, would go to his homework and would be happy he'd be doing an excellent job, and turn in his stuff on time. And I would just say, don't forget to do that. Good work. That's not really the case in our household. He would be much happier either not to do very much at all or to do the minimum amount. And so the question is, how much should you help and how much should you let them suffer the consequences of not doing well?
Right.
That's a great question. That's good. Yeah. The question is, how much do you get involved? Well, all right, middle school is tricky because you need a little of both. You need to be involved and not involved. Right now is the time when you really have to be looking for people other than you who can influence your child. As you move into adolescence, you are the last person that is going to influence them. You could sit down and do homework with your kid. It would take 3 hours, and a perfect stranger may take 40 minutes. So that we need to bring more people on the field. I'm a big, parents hate when I say, I'm a big crash and burn guy.
What do you mean?
If they're going to learn about grades and things like that, if you do it in middle school or high school, they're within the confines of sort of a safe environment. You know, they can, and if you bring in teachers or you bring in, kids had to, over at Salk, they had a panel that the student would have to go before a panel and explain. And it sounds like shocking, right? It really worked because, and I recommended don't involve the parents. Do not bring the parents in. This is between the school and the child. You know, so we really want to look at fostering more independence, and at times he's going to have to fail. And you're going to say, you know what, talk to your teacher. This is really between you two. Yeah.
The crash and burn thing, it's very difficult, especially in a school like lab. I mean, there's a window that you can do it,
Yeah.
which is like 6th grade.
Yeah.
Because 7th grade already is like, affects, you know, the high
Yeah.
school. 8th grade affects the high school.
Yeah.
I mean, as a parent, you know, you want to say, all right, you don't want to go, don't go. You don't want to do this, fail.
I think, you know, you need both. If you're always micromanaging your kid through every assignment, bad. If you just throw your hands up and say, do what you want, bad. In middle school, you have to have a foot in both courts. And you have to decide when you're going to let them pay the consequences. Is that clear? Yes.
I'm still interested in ways of motivating a kid who isn't motivated, or getting a kid who cares about, like, definitely if I said, okay, you don't want to get good grades, that's fine, there would be no consequence to that until we, you know, applied to college, really. So, you know, how do you, and sometimes I wouldn't buy grades, but I might bribe, and again, that thing between a bribe and a motivation, like, what are some healthy ways to inspire? Or to want to find 5 things that give them self-esteem, because they don't care. I know what's in his best interest.
That's
But he would be content to be a slacker.
Right. That's right. So basically what we're covering, like the 5 things, if your kid isn't doing any of them, you don't have a chance in hell he's going to be motivated. You know, if kids come in and they're depressed and then this thing, and the parents are like, let's go, let's go, let's go. Let's get things going here. You know, and we have to really look at the whole child. If there's a big fat protest over work, there's a lot of missing pieces along the way. So I'd really want to get to know why. And also, I also get the sense that, like, if a child feels like you're subtly trying to control them, you're going to lose. You know, so we have to figure out another way of approaching them, another way of engaging them, because he's not going to do it for you.
Are you saying a reward system doesn't work then? Is it counterproductive?
It depends on the child.
A bribe is when you offer something ahead of time.
Right.
But if you say, hey, if you get to this level, you know, what is it that you'd want? What would be a good reward to you?
Right. That's a great conversation. That's a good conversation.
But doesn't it fall along the lines of what this gentleman
It's
said?
very different. It's very different because one is you're sort of divvying out punishments and rewards as sort of a dictator. And the other is you're a member of a family and you're working out ways of being together. You're collaborating with them. At this age, you always want to collaborate as much as possible. They want to feel a part of that. It's like your question, what would be a good reward for this? What do you think? What would you like? That's an excellent one. Because right away, you're enlisting them rather than, you know, just delivering decisions, which they will resist. If you want to increase defiance, orders and directives. You know, it's human nature not to want to be controlled. And the minute you are, you're going to get back. You're going to find a way to get it back. So I'd like, you know, that dynamic right now is very interesting to me because I feel like your kids have got you. You're the hostage.
I think my kids just don't care about what I care about, and my struggle obviously is trying to flip that switch.
That's right.
So it's like you were boarding a plane for Alaska and you landed in the Caribbean. You had an expectation that your kids were going to be, a hope that they were going to do it, and it was dashed.
One of the things, techniques I use, I think maybe unconsciously, to get my kid engaged in activities like the self-esteem, just other activities, is I find out what friends are doing it. If I find out another boy that he likes is doing it, that's like, I'm so grateful that I can pitch it to.
I had a family like that, and they the tutor would come and it would be like just a drag for everyone, and they put together three kids from the school to get together, changed the whole dynamic, because kids are start to be more influenced by their peers. So that's an excellent idea. Fourth one, we're on four, is models and mentors. The single most powerful intervention you can make with your child, right next to the exercising. When kids get an internship, or parents arrange for them to work in a friend's office and then they pay the friend to pay them, the minute they want to be grown up, right? And you're giving them the opportunity to be grown up. So I had a kid, they tried, and we had all kinds of therapy. He had been in therapy since 4th grade. And I was like, oh boy, what am I going to do now? And he was such a slacker, total slacker. And, but he was really good at cartoons. And I noticed that he had a sketchbook. He was really good. So I called a friend at that time. Cartoon Network was working at 8th Avenue. And I called the kid and I told him, I know a friend works, he draws Venture Brothers and stuff like that. And he was like, I said, do you want to get an internship there or something? I set the time, I was meeting him at 7:30 in the morning in Grand Central. He showed up with a tie and a shirt with his portfolio, and we spent 3 hours at Cartoon Network. He was transformed. So a lot of time people think put him in therapy. Therapy cannot deliver all the solutions. And there's plenty of evidence of that around where kids have been in therapy for so long. So if you can find a model or mentor or someone, even that they can be in the presence of that person. Used to have someone in Brooklyn, their kid used to have these terrible morning meltdowns, like terrible, wouldn't go to school. He was a freshman in high school. But the neighbor, Jonathan, was a really powerful force. He didn't have a father. So we talked to his mother. She invited Jonathan over for breakfast a few times a week. What would happen? Kid got right up. He wouldn't behave that way in front of a stranger, in front of Jonathan, in front of other people. So that, bringing in other people that have a powerful influence on your child is super duper effective. And the last one is learning diagnostics. This is where you're going to see it. Okay, anytime a parent says my kid is lazy or just doesn't care and all that stuff, I always start to get really suspicious. Because a lot of learning diagnostics or difficult learning problems are under the radar in elementary school. They just coast right through. And then suddenly in middle school, something starts to go wrong. And they will always tell you, I don't want to do it, but actually they may be having a lot of trouble at it. Kids will tell you when they have trouble with something, what is the first thing? I don't care. I don't care. They're not going to say, this is really hard for me and I'm embarrassed. And everyone in class can do it but me. They just say, oh look, there's a girl. Now I don't have to think about this problem anymore. So we don't want to get wrapped up in the symptom too much. We want to look at everything. Also, if he's suffering self-esteem wise, and boy, I saw this with girls a lot. Girls are generally 2 years ahead of boys in maturing. So boys, you take like a 12-year-old boy, in my group is talking about Pokemon and all this stuff, and girls are talking about relationships. And sometimes I can't even mesh the two. Sometimes I have to put the younger girls with older kids so they can, feel more comfortable. But I want to look at that, because that may be just camouflaging something else. And it's a great excuse, right? Because I'm interested in girls. I care about work. It's much easier to do that. You know, so a learning evaluation, if you're fighting the same wars all the time. I had a kid who was was a war zone too, and I insisted on a learning evaluation. But he's so smart, and that's I hear they're all, he's so smart, and he did this, and in elementary school he was this, and then I said, well, let's just do it. Let's just do it. You know, like, I wish I had done it for myself, right? At that age, I would have saved a lot of time. There's a reason I'm not an accountant. So what came back was his auditory processing. Now his abstract thinking and his reasoning were in the 90 percentile. I see this all the time. They call it in the very superior range, right? His auditory processing was 15%. How do you learn in school? So he was missing 85%. He was behind constantly, you know?
It's not project-based anymore. It goes from elementary school, which is project-based, and they can learn by doing, and then it shifts to this thing that's all auditory, that they're being spoken to all
That's
day
right.
long.
And they have to write when kids can't write. And if they use a keyboard, that's a lot better. But I've told you, a number of psychologists, you know, we've gone through this. A kid's 16, and his self-esteem's been devastated. You know, and he's reminded by his parents what a disappointment he is in subtle ways. And then we, you know, I call up, I can't think of her name, but, and she'd say, this kid is dyslexic. How the heck did he get this far? I'm astounded he's passed anything. You know, so a lot of times you can get into a war zone area when your kid honestly is struggling. You just don't know it. And that happens so the learning diagnostics are so sophisticated right now. They're really expensive, but if you're thrifty, you can go to Columbia University, you can go to different places, get them for half the price or next to nothing. They'll be done by someone who's being supervised by, you know, one of the top people, and they'll be there the whole time anyway. You know, otherwise you're going to spend $3,000 to $5,000 privately.
Yeah. But they converse not better.
Do you guys know Janine Mastrangelo?
Yeah.
She's amazing. You're so lucky to have her at this school. The group she runs, and I was hired once to brought into a private school that had a bullying issue, and there was a very subtle kids will be kids approach to it, and they mobilized a whole lunchtime groups. They targeted certain kids. We're putting them in a group, and they really had to aggressively attack the situation. This is something that does not, you know, will not resolve itself naturally in a satisfying way, you know. So I really think it's a great subject, and it is part of the culture right now. And I think bringing someone in, it's going to be a tough session, right? But it will really it will help your kid and help the school in the end. So we're going to wrap up here. There's plenty of articles on this site. It's all free. So thank you for having me. You know, I had a parent who I was at war with his daughter, and I'd known them for so many years, in and out of my office, and he came in, and I had never seen him like this. He was just in a rage, and I looked at his daughter, and what is going on here? Now she's not being cooperative, she's not being this, and he's telling me, you know, and she's just fights me on everything, and blah, 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 blah. And then so I asked the daughter to step outside, and I'd known this guy a long time, and I was like, Andy, look at your daughter, huh? She's a young woman. Pretty soon she's not going to need you at all. And he started to cry. So adolescence comes with a mourning period on both sides of the fence. That you mourn the loss of that little child, and the child mourns the loss of the idealized parent.
Hi.
Hi.